My American boss, visiting our office in Tuscany, was taken to a centuries-old olive grove. The owner explained the trees were a specific ancient varietal. My boss nodded thoughtfully and said, "The yield must be low. Have you considered replacing these with a modern, genetically modified high-yield crop? You're sitting on a gold mine, but your production model is totally inefficient." He saw heritage as a bug, not a feature. At a museum in London, we were looking at a medieval tapestry depicting a complex battle scene. An American tourist next to me squinted at it and said to his wife, "The storytelling is all wrong. There's no clear protagonist. How are you supposed to know who to root for?" It's like they didn't even understand basic narrative structure back then. I was explaining the concept of the Roman Forum to an American visitor. He asked, "Whoa, so this was their downtown?" "Okay, I get it. But where are the logos? There's no branding anywhere. How did people know which temple was for which god? It's a marketing nightmare. They should have had a consistent brand identity." During a university lecture on the construction of the Great Pyramids, an American exchange student raised his hand. "I have a question about the labor contracts," he said. "Were the workers unionized? And what was the overtime pay rate? It seems like a project with massive potential for workplace litigation." An American I met in a pub in Dublin was complaining about the Irish language Gaelic. "It's just not a very user-friendly language, he insisted. The spelling and pronunciation are completely counterintuitive. They should have done some A/B testing before they rolled it out. It's like they wanted it to be difficult." While touring a medieval castle in Germany, the guide explained the concept of feudal fealty. An American in the group looked confused and asked, "So the peasants just worked the land for free? Why didn't they just quit and find a better job with a more competitive salary and benefits package? It sounds like they had terrible career mobility." I overheard an American tourist at the Parthenon in Athens talking on his phone. "Yeah, it's impressive," he said, "but the whole thing is a huge intellectual property issue. They totally ripped off the design for the Lincoln Memorial. I wonder if the Greeks ever tried to sue for copyright infringement." My company sent an executive from California to our office in Kyoto. We took him to a traditional Zen garden. After the guide explained the deep symbolism of the rocks and sand, our exec said, "I see the aesthetic, but what's the user engagement strategy? It feels very static. You could boost visitor interaction with a few well-placed QR codes." At an exhibit on Viking longships, an American was examining the intricate dragon head on the prow. He turned to his son and said, "See, that's their problem right there. They spent all this time on decorative carvings instead of focusing on core functionality, like adding a second mast for speed. It's classic feature creep." A friend of mine was teaching a course on ancient philosophy. A student from the US asked, "So what was Socrates' business model? Was he charging a subscription fee for his Socratic method workshops? Or was it more of a freemium model, where the first question was free?" In Rome, looking at the ruins of an ancient aqueduct, an American tourist remarked, "This is a brilliant piece of infrastructure, but they missed a huge opportunity to monetize it. They could have made it a toll system and charged different cities for water access. It's like they had no concept of public-private partnerships." I was at a museum in Egypt, looking at the Rosetta Stone. The American man next to me said, "It's great they figured out the translation, but the typography is a disaster. The kerning on these hieroglyphs is all over the place. They really needed a good graphic designer to clean this up for better readability." While visiting a historic monastery in the French Alps, an American asked the guide, "What was the security system like? Did they have guards and patrols? Because this place seems very vulnerable to a hostile takeover. Their risk management protocol must have been non-existent." An American tourist in Florence was looking at Michelangelo's David. He nodded and said, "The artistry is top-notch, but from a public relations standpoint, the nudity is a bold choice. It definitely wouldn't fly in a Texas school district. It really limits his appeal to the family-friendly demographic." At a historical site in Israel, the guide explained that a particular village had been continuously inhabited for 4,000 years. An American whispered to his friend, "That's insane. Think of the property taxes, and I bet they've never once updated the zoning laws. The bureaucracy must be a nightmare." I was watching a traditional Morris dancing performance in an English village. An American tourist commented, "The choreography is a little dated, don't you think? It's not very dynamic. It could really use a remix with a modern beat to make it go viral on TikTok. They're missing a huge market." A student in my medieval history class was struggling with the concept of arranged royal marriages. "So they didn't even get to date first?" she asked. "That's so unhealthy. It's like they had no understanding of basic relationship psychology or personal branding. You have to build your brand as a couple." At a museum displaying ancient Roman surgical tools, an American visitor shook his head. "This is horrifying," he said. "Where are the FDA approval numbers on these instruments? And I certainly hope they had patients sign liability waivers. This looks like a class action lawsuit waiting to happen." Overheard at the site of the ancient Olympic Games in Greece. "So everyone competed naked. That's a major wardrobe malfunction. The sponsors would have hated that. Nowhere to put the logos. It's a terrible business decision." An American was looking at a map of the Silk Road. He said, "The supply chain management must have been a complete disaster. No tracking numbers, no delivery confirmations. How did they handle customer returns? It's amazing any of these businesses stayed afloat." In a class on Shakespeare, an American student argued that Romeo and Juliet had a toxic, codependent relationship, and that their story was a problematic narrative that glorifies poor impulse control. He suggested the play needed a trigger warning for its failure to promote healthy communication skills. A tourist at a 1,000-year-old church in Spain complained about the acoustics. "The reverb in here is terrible," he said. "You can't understand anything. They should have installed some modern acoustic panels when they built it. It's a classic case of prioritizing aesthetics over user experience." My American friend was reading about the fall of the Roman Empire. He concluded it was a classic case of a legacy brand failing to adapt to a changing market. They didn't innovate, their leadership was bloated, and they got disrupted by smaller, more agile startups like the Goths and Vandals. At a demonstration of falconry at a British castle, an American asked the handler, "What's the bandwidth on that bird? How far can it go before the signal drops? It's basically a biological drone, but the range seems very limited." An American tourist looking at the Bayeux Tapestry, which depicts the Norman conquest of 1066, commented, "This is a very inefficient way to tell a story. It's just one long, static image. Why didn't they just make a movie? It would have been much more engaging for the audience." While visiting a preserved medieval village, an American asked a guide, what was the local governance model? Was it a homeowners association or more of a municipal structure? I'd like to see the minutes from their town hall meetings. In a museum of natural history, looking at a Neanderthal skeleton, an American teenager said, "His posture is terrible. He's not projecting confidence at all. He really needed a life coach to help him work on his personal brand and self-esteem." An American in a historic French vineyard asked the winemaker, "So your family has been making wine here for 500 years? That's cool, but have you ever thought about an exit strategy? You could sell to a big corporation and finally retire." At the cliffs of Moher in Ireland, a tourist from the US said, "This is a beautiful natural formation, but the lack of safety railings is a huge liability. In America, this whole area would be fenced off with warning signs every 10 feet. It's like they don't even care about preventing lawsuits." An American was looking at an ancient sundial in a castle courtyard. He checked his watch and said, "It's not even that accurate, and it doesn't work at night or when it's cloudy. It's a neat concept, but as a piece of technology, it's a total failure. They should have just invented clocks sooner." I was at a museum exhibit on the Magna Carta. An American lawyer in training was studying it intently. He then announced to his friend, This is a terribly drafted document. The language is ambiguous, it's full of loopholes, and it's not even notarized. No wonder they had so many wars. This thing would get torn apart in a modern deposition. My American friend was reading about the Greek pantheon and couldn't get over the family dynamics. This is a PR nightmare, she said. You have a CEO, Zeus, who is a serial harasser, and a board of directors constantly backstabbing each other. How did they maintain public trust? The brand image is completely chaotic and unprofessional. During a lecture on the Trojan War, a student from the US critiqued the Greek strategy. The whole Trojan horse idea shows a shocking lack of operational security, he argued. They had no quality control for incoming gifts and no protocol for inspecting suspicious packages. It was a catastrophic failure of their entire cybersecurity framework. An American tourist at a medieval fair was watching a demonstration of historical cooking. He commented loudly, "I don't see any gluten-free or vegan options on this menu. It's very exclusionary." A successful food service business needs to cater to a wide range of dietary restrictions. They're really limiting their customer base. While visiting the cave paintings at Lascaux, France, an American art student seemed unimpressed. "The technique is primitive, obviously," she said, "but my main issue is the lack of a clear artist's statement. What's the core message here? It feels very unfocused. There's no coherent narrative for the viewer to latch onto." I was explaining the role of a court jester in a medieval monarchy to an American. He shook his head in disbelief. "So, it was a dead-end job with no upward mobility, and your only job security was the king's mood. That's a terrible career path. What did their 401k and severance packages look like? It's an HR disaster." My history professor told us about an American business student who wrote a paper on Christopher Columbus. The student's thesis was that Columbus failed because he lacked a coherent business plan, misidentified his target market, and dramatically failed to deliver on his initial promises to his investors. He got a C. At the ruins of the labyrinth at Knossos, I overheard an American complaining to his family. "This place is a lawsuit waiting to happen. There's no clear signage, no emergency exits, and it's completely inaccessible for wheelchairs. This whole structure is in flagrant violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act." An American tourist in Rome was horrified by the concept of the public baths. "So they all just bathed together in the same water?" he asked the guide. "That's a massive public health risk. The potential for cross-contamination is insane. Where was their version of the CDC? This is how you get pandemics." We were studying the Code of Hammurabi in my world history class. A student from California raised her hand. "This eye for an eye thing seems like a really harsh HR policy," she said. "It would create a super hostile work environment and be terrible for employee morale. I bet they had a really high turnover rate." An American I met at a pub in England was baffled by the concept of a monarchy. "So, the leadership position is determined by birthright, not by merit or a democratic vote?" he asked. "That's a terrible succession plan. It completely stifles innovation and leaves the entire organization vulnerable to incompetent management." While watching a documentary about the Library of Alexandria, my American roommate was agitated. "They had the world's most important collection of data and no off-site backup," he exclaimed. "It was a single point of failure. It's a classic IT disaster. They needed a robust data redundancy and disaster recovery plan." An American tourist at a demonstration of Japanese ukiyo-e woodblock printing commented, "This is a very inefficient production method. It's not scalable at all. Why didn't they just invent a modern printing press? They could have increased their output and market penetration by 1,000%. I was explaining the Oracle at Delphi to an American data scientist. He was skeptical. "So, leaders were making major state decisions based on vague, ambiguous prophecies," he asked. "That's not actionable intelligence. You can't build a reliable predictive model on such a flawed and inconsistent data source." A friend from the US was reading Homer's The Odyssey. His review: the story has major pacing issues. The protagonist is off-screen for huge chunks of the narrative, and the timeline is all over the place. It desperately needs a good editor to tighten it up and make the character's journey more relatable for a modern audience. At a Druid heritage site in Ireland, an American tourist watched a reenactment of an ancient ceremony. He whispered to his wife, "What's the deliverable here?" The objectives for this meeting are very unclear. They should have circulated an agenda beforehand so everyone knew what to expect. My American cousin was learning about medieval sieges. He compared it to business. "This is a terribly inefficient method for a hostile takeover," he concluded. "The timeline is way too long and the resource burn is unsustainable. They should have focused on disrupting their opponent's supply chain from within." An American exchange student was trying to understand the concept of chivalry. "So it was basically a professional code of conduct," he asked. "Was it legally binding? Because it seems like a lot of these knights were in constant violation of their own terms of service. There should have been a review board." While visiting a preserved Viking settlement, an American tourist looked at the longhouse and said, "This open-plan living concept is nice, but the lack of privacy is a major drawback. It would be impossible to have a healthy work-life balance in this environment. It's a recipe for burnout." An American was looking at an ancient map of the world in a Portuguese museum. He pointed out the sea monsters drawn in the oceans. "This is just irresponsible," he said. "Imagine the effect this had on the shipping and logistics industries. It's fear-mongering that probably had a negative impact on the entire global economy."